Right, in the previous video I just showed how to remove just the basics on removing the electronics. Now we're going to do the front end. I left this detached on purpose, so I did not attach it on the previous one. Now, these two, I'm going to go ahead and remove these two screws. And then at the bottom, so on the bottom, we're going to have to remove some other screws. Now, two of them will be for the bumper. Those we want to remove first, and that will give us access to the bulkhead. Now, on a truck like this, depending on what you do, if you just run it on road and there are no real hard obstacles to hit and crash, you will be fine for the most part. But if you start doing a little more, say, serious bashing or serious racing, one of the things that you're going to find is that the bulkhead will probably break. It's no big deal. Well, it's no big deal until it breaks. But what I mean is Associated does make a steel bulkhead, which is very durable, very nice, and it will replace this plastic one that you will see in a bit. So these two screws will remove it from the bumper. Now we have these two screws here. Now, if you have an sorry, not SC10. This is the SC10 SR10. It's actually very similar. It's the same. It's just shorter chassis. But what I mean by that is servicing, taking apart and rebuilding it is the same. I do have videos on that vehicle, so do check those out. Let's see, we'll go ahead and place this screw. Now, all four screws are the same length, so I'm not worried about mixing them. But these are the ones that you want to replace. Sorry, not replace, remove. The ones you want to remove. Once we remove those 6 screws, the 2 on top and the 2 on bottom, we will be able to remove the entire front end, which is very nice. Everything is now accessible. I do recommend if you replace the servo horn for an aluminum horn, so if you get rid of the servo saver, replace the bell crank with an aluminum one. You will break the bell crank if you do not. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, in order to remove the bell crank, it's just going to be these 2 screws right in here. So if we just go in there, this will remove them. All right, and we'll go ahead and remove this one. Now you could use an electric screwdriver if you want. I'm used to doing this by hand. But that is it. So this is now removed. Now I will actually remove the turnbuckles up here. You can remove them there. I'm going to take them off the top and just leave them on here. So I'll put this off to the side and I'll talk about this for now. All right. A few little things. You have your bearings here. If your kit for some reason doesn't have bearings, I would be very, very surprised. But make sure that you have bearings. Bearings are the way to go. If you ever buy a different kit that has bushings, just replace them. Put bearings in your steering. But you're going to have a bearing on top, bearing on bottom. So there's going to be 2 bearings in here, 2 bearings there, and the same goes for this other side. Now, in order to remove the bearings, you just get a driver. Actually, a 1.5 driver would be a better choice. And you just stick the driver in at an angle, and you have the 2 bearings like this. So when you stick it at an angle, well, you're going inside, you're just going to push one of the bearings out. So by putting it in here, you will feel where the other bearing seats, and you just push on that bearing. And just be gentle. Bearing comes out, and then You can see the bearing in there. Just push that bearing out. At this point I would use the larger driver, and then you can just push that one out. And this is also how you can service these. Now, these are relatively clean. I mean, this truck has not seen dirt. This truck has been kept very, very clean. But that's how you would replace the bearings, and you would do it there, and these over here. So for now, we shall leave this off to the side, and I'm going to talk about the other components that we have over here. Now for these nuts, you just use a 5.5 millimeter driver, and all you do is you just stick your 2 millimeter driver right over here, and then your nut driver on this other side, and you simply turn. Now it all depends on why you want to remove them. Maybe you're replacing them, maybe you're servicing them, but you will have to remove them regardless of what you are doing. Now I'm only going to remove one, because once you remove one, you know how to remove the other. Something important is this little plastic piece. This is where the shock mounts. Now the larger side goes toward the shock tower, the thinner side goes toward the shock. So we'll go ahead and place this here. Now there's a nut in here. For this, you will need your driver once again, and it's a 5.5. You stick this one in here, you remove the nut, and then you can change which hole you're using. Now it is possible to bend these, but it's very, very rare to bend the screws, but maybe you have to replace the screws. Or what would be more common, maybe you have to replace the body mounts, and maybe this is now broken, so you will have to remove that screw. Now I'm going to move on to the body mount. So the body mount, we have this protector here. This goes on the shock tower. It's held by this screw and the other screw, and then you have a countersunk screw right here in the center. You simply remove 1, 2, 3. This whole piece will come out. If you simply want to adjust the height, you remove this screw, and then you move this up or down, and then you stick the screw back in. Do not over tighten any of these screws. They're going into plastic. This one, and this one. You can strip plastic, and then it's a pain. You can use some CA glue or super glue or something similar to try to fix the problem, but it will not be the same. At this point, let me go ahead and just separate these links. It would be easier for me to separate them over here. And there is more than one way to separating these links. One, you can clip them off, or two, you can just stick a driver in there and it'll drive out. At this point, I'm just gonna pop them off. And that's it. But like I said, you can stick a driver through the hole and then just remove that ball stud. And there we go. And that is it. All right. So we have that. Now, because I do want to separate everything, I don't want to take that top one. I'm going to remove the shock from the bottom. So removing the shock from the arm, I already showed you how to remove it from the top. Let's go from the arm, and we're going to remove this one over here. You just back out the screw. That is it. Now keep in mind where the shocks are. For this, I'm going to assemble it back the way it was. So the shocks were in the outer position at the bottom. If you put one on the outer position, the other one on the inner position, it's going to handle a bit strange. There we go. All right, perfect. So here we have the whole arm section. Now I'm going to talk about the front end. For the bumper, you have two screws here. Once you remove the two down here and these two, this whole bottom plate can come off. It is possible to break this, although I think it's rare. This is the spring. Sometimes the spring can get damaged for the bumper. This is what absorbs. Now to remove the shock tower, first you have to remove the shocks, as I mentioned, so you will need that 5.5 millimeter nut driver. Remove the shocks. Once you remove the shocks and that little conical plastic piece, you remove this nut right here. Once you remove this, then this screw will go out. So do it to here, do it to there. Then you will have another screw right in here. Now I will not be removing this, but this will release this entire section right here, and this is the body mount. If you want to adjust the height of the body mount, just remove this screw. This will slide up or down, and then place the screw back in. Now focusing back on the body mount. Sorry, shock tower. In order to remove the shock tower, you will have to remove the bumper. So let me just sidetrack and go to the bumper. If you need to replace this plate, 1, 2, those 2 screws that we already removed, and then 2 screws here, this plate will come off. It will come off the spring. But if your focus is only on replacing the spring, then it'll be 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. Let me go ahead and remove this right here. So I'll remove the entire bumper, so then we can go into the actual shock tower, how to remove the shock tower, the final steps. All right, once the bumper's off, what we have here is this piece. So this is your shock tower, and this is the top part of the bulkhead. You just have 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I will not be removing them, but you just remove these 4. Once you install the new one, do not over tighten. Snug is all you need. These linkages, you just, right here in this hole, you just stick your 2mm driver, and then you can just loosen this off. So I could have removed the ball stud with the link on this other side. I decided to snap off, and then I can just snap it back on. But this is all you would do. I'm not going to remove the entire thing, but keep in mind there's a little spacer in here, and you can add spacers, you can remove spacers depending on your tuning needs. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this back up. So again, to assemble it, reinstall the ball studs, 1, 2, 3, 4 screws that go to this piece. Notice the orientation of the shock tower, right? These concave sections go forward because that's where your bumper goes. So keep that in mind. So if you're looking at it, this is going to go forward. Then you can just install your shock screws for the body mount. Install this, right? Drive the nuts, insert that conical piece, right? There's the shock, little nuts in there. But let's go ahead and install the bumper. When you install this spring, make sure that you hold it against the shock tower so that it doesn't move. Now it is conical, so it's going to fit in there. It's not going to be that difficult to keep it aligned. But just grab 1 screw, drive it in, and to get it close, don't tighten this one yet until you drive the other one. So this one I'm just going to get close to get rid of a good portion of the play, but I'm not going to fully tighten that one until I install this second one. And it doesn't matter which one you do, right or left. But here we go. So this one I will be tightening fully, and then I'll go back to the first screw and tighten that one fully. There, and there. All right, that is it. So that entire part is assembled. Now let me show you how to take this part apart. Right here, if this were installed, so this could be completely installed and you just needed to replace the arm, it is easier to remove everything, to be honest. You need to remove the shock. To remove the shock, you only remove this and that's it. So because this one's already removed, I'm going to do it to this side, which happens to be the right side. So I'll be working on the right side. Now, to remove the arm, there's a variety of ways that you can do it. The easiest way is to remove this rear little screw. Now, this rear little screw, this is a retaining screw for the pin that holds the arm. I had to swap cameras because the other camera kept cutting out. So there's a few things. Let me go back and just go over how to remove the arms. So removing the arms, this arm would be here. There's this pin would go in there. So all you do is you remove the little retaining screw. So there's going to be a little screw just like this. You remove it, and then you simply push the pin out. You can just stick a 1.5 millimeter driver. Pin comes out. Once that happens, you can just remove the arm. Now, to remove the caster block, you do the exact same thing. Now, one side has a small hole. The other side is going to have that little retaining screw. That's this retaining screw. Remove the retaining screw. This will be inside. Now, this is a smaller hole, so your 1.5 will not fit all the way. I mean, the 1.5, just the bit end, just that part will go, but you need to push it farther. Use a pick. If not, push it as far as you can with your driver and then just grab some pliers and then just pull this out. That's all you do. And then this will come out. But notice the orientation. Don't mount this backwards. All right. Now, this bulkhead, this is what generally breaks. So what you will do for this, you do not need to remove these little retaining screws. You just need to remove these others. So it's this 2 millimeter and the other 2 millimeter. And once you remove this, that metal brace is going to come out. Now, this is a more robust brace than some of the other models. So if you look at a B6, 1, 2, or 3, or the SC 6.1 or 0.2, that metal plate is less than half of the thickness and it breaks. But you would just remove this, just like that, and then you can remove this pin. So that's another way. You can remove it out the back or out the front. So if you're replacing this, don't bother with the back retaining screw, just deal with the front, just this plate, remove it, and then you can take this off and install the steel. To reinstall everything, well, you just place that, make sure, just wiggle a little, make sure that goes in. Now, just for fun, since I want to install everything through the front rather than the rear of the bulkhead, I will go ahead and install this retaining screw on the arm. Now these just go snug. Do not over tighten them, because if you over tighten them, strip them, if that screw comes off, your pin's coming out and then that arm is useless. All right, so place the arm, grab the pin, just oops, some of you saw what I did. All right, wrong pin. All right, not a big deal. If you do this, just remove the screw here on the back, use the correct pin, and just push the other one out. Not a big deal. There we go. All right, let's put this in. All right, perfect. Once this is sat, you can grab this plate and just set it on top, and that is it. Now we can just use our 2 millimeter driver and drive this in. And we'll drive the other one. Now, if you were using the steel, you really want to use some type of thread locking compound for these screws. But we're going into plastic, therefore it is not needed. But that's all we have for the arms. At this point, let me go ahead and show you how to take this apart. Now, one of the things to notice is you have these little hats in there. This just uses a 2 millimeter driver. So you're gonna grab the driver and just hold this piece so that it doesn't wiggle back and forth. And you would remove both of these screws in order to replace any of these components, whether it's the caster block or the steering knuckle. So that's that one. So if you were to break this part here or this, you would have to do this. Now I'm going to hold it this way. And this is it. So these, they look like little hats. These are very important. They have to go in here. If you do not have those in there, you will have a lot of play and you're probably going to break your new steering knuckle. So make sure that these are in place correctly. Now this just uses a 2mm driver. Back it out and place it back in. Now let's just say this is fine and what you broke is this. Well, one of the things that you will be needing to do is one, remove this with a 2mm driver, but also this one right over here. Now, if you don't have a wrench that's large enough, that's an 8mm, for this, to hold this, actually is this, no, this is larger. This is a 12, I don't know why I said 8mm, that number threw me off. This is a 12. Just use the wheel. So just stick the wheel in here and then hold it, and then you can just use your driver and that will loosen it. So you don't need an actual wrench to carry a wrench that size, just use the wheel. And then once you loosened it, you can remove this. See the screws here? See it has a lot of gunk. Make sure if you use the new screw to use thread lock, and this will slide out, and that is it. Now the bearings, just use a driver and stick it inside, and then the bearings should pop out. And it's just 2 bearings, you do the same thing to each. So if you had to replace the bearings also, that's the way that you would do that. Then just seat the bearings. Make sure when you're seating them that they go in straight. If not, they're not going to want to go inside, and if you force them, you're going to damage the plastic on the knuckle. That is it. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this. Again, if you cannot manage to hold this with your fingers when you're tightening it, just use the wheel. All right, that is it. Now, to reinstall, one of the things to note is the orientation. Now, I'm holding this so it doesn't fall out. This goes that way, and I'm using this one as an example, which means that this has to go this way. Therefore, when I install, I'm going to hold it this way just so those little hats don't fall off. I want those bushings to stay there. And this is, there we go. It's actually very tight fit. All right. Then you place one of them, doesn't matter, top or bottom, and then just go through and you tighten this, and this is it. Now, if this is your very first Team Associated vehicle and you're used to, for example, Traxxas Slash or some of those vehicles, or even the rears, because these are one piece, you do not have that little pin with the hex. I guess it's nice, right? Less parts. But here we go. So this will just be in here, and make sure everything moves freely, everything is good, feels good. We can go ahead and reassemble it now. So I will go ahead and place this in here. Use the correct pin. That will go flush. And now I can use my 1.5mm driver for the little retaining screw. And that is it. I would say snug, but it's not even snug. I mean, they barely go in there. They don't take that much force. All right, so now we can make this to the front. So if we go in here, just open up the bumper, just bend this down. That's it. And there's these little holes, they're just gonna key in. So there's parts, everything just keys inside. And that is it. So at this point, you can go ahead and put your shocks inside. Right here in the arm section. And use that really long screw. There we go. And now I'm going to just grab the link, and the link will just snap on. And I will do the same thing to the link on the other side. Had you removed the link from here, the same way, snapped off, you just snap on. These I find easier to remove with the ball stud. But this is it. Now, once this screw, assuming you have already done this section, this will just slide inside, then the shock. Now, really quick, I did not go over the shocks, but this cap, you just remove the cap. You can dump the oil out if you needed to replace it, but these do not need replacing. One little note though, once you fill up the shock with oil, before you fill it, you want to make sure the piston's all the way to the bottom. Then you pour your oil in, let it sit for just a bit, just so some of those bubbles come to the top. Put more oil if you need to, and then just move the piston slowly up and down. You will see some air bubbles. Then put some more oil. Let's see. Then after that, what you want to do is you place the cap on, but you want to rotate the cap left first. And then once you hear the little snap like it seats, then go right and tighten it. And you want to move the piston, or you want to compress the piston to get rid of the pack, tighten it all the way, and then just check it, make sure everything is fine. The reason why you want to go left first until you hear that click is to make sure that it seats where the threads will start to engage. If not, you run a high risk of cross-threading your plastic cap. Do that with aluminum caps as well. But that is it for the front end. So now I'm going to go ahead and leave this, and then on the next one I will reinstall everything onto the chassis. Actually, I'll go ahead and just do it now. So to reinstall this, we have our bell crank. Now our bell crank, these will go here, and this is something that you want to watch the orientation. Make sure this is the correct way. You don't accidentally flip this. Although you will quickly find out if you were to flip this arm here would hit the chassis. So just make sure that this is sticking up, which means that these screws go from the bottom, just like this. Right? It'll look like that. And I'm going to go ahead and place this here. So if you were replacing this with an aluminum one, this would be the process. Let's go. And right, perfect. Okay, so that's seated. All right, once everything's set, you can just drive them in. I'm driving them in little by little just to make sure nothing snags onto something else. But this is all. All right, and check, make sure everything moves freely. Yes, it does. And now I can just go ahead and snap these in place. Now the front end is a little easier than the rear end. The rear end I'll probably do in multiple videos. But this is it for the front end. So let me go ahead and just slide this in. So this chassis is just going to go between the bulkhead, right? This lower bulkhead and the bumper. It'll just go in right in here. So let's go ahead and do that. And this will just slide in. And everything keys in, so you will feel everything just going in its place. And that is it. Now I will begin with the top screws because they're easier to install, because the bumper's not in the way, since I have the bumper on. You could have left the bumper off, you know, just the plate, and leave the spring on because the spring's a pain when everything's connected. Right. There's one, then we'll do the second one, and then we'll just flip the vehicle over. We have 4 more screws to go, and then the front end will be completely attached. All right, first screws you want to do are the back screws, which is this one and then the one beside it. The bumper is quite flexible, so don't worry, just move it off to the side. Then this one I will just drive close. I'm not going to tighten it fully until the second one is in there. Here we go. Now this truck does belong to a very good friend of mine, one of my RC buddies. Do follow him at Rod's Reels RCs. He has a lot of really cool reels on his Instagram, especially if you like crawlers. I recommend that you do follow him. And let him know that you saw one of his vehicles in my channel, and then I can convince him to lend me more of his vehicles. I'm kidding, he's a real cool guy. If he has something cool, I generally just ask him for it, and he'll lend it to me, assuming he's not planning on driving it immediately. There we go. So those are good. So now we can go over here. We line up these, and this is it. Now, these are RTR vehicles, but I do recommend for anybody that's planning on getting into RC to eventually consider a kit. This is actually a very good truck. I do consider this to be a better truck than the Traxxas / two-wheel drive. Yet, I still recommend that somebody that's brand new consider a / two-wheel drive kit just to assemble it, to get an idea of how things work. Now, the final step is to set the steering servo linkage to the bell crank. So here I have the ball stud that just has to go in there. And that is it. Snug is all you need. And we're completely finished. So on the next video, I will move on to the rear of the vehicle. I will be detaching this and then disassembling everything, including the transmission. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you have not. Comment below if you would like, or if you have any tips and tricks, or any other questions that you would like me to explore further. And I'll catch you in the next one.
What? Oh, my hair! My arm! My rod!